Okay, so we are ready to start the next module. I know it's odd that we are 90 minutes or so into a PowerPoint training class and we are now opening up PowerPoint, but as I mentioned, you have to know what you're going to make before you start working in PowerPoint, so that's why we needed to spend that much time up front getting everything figured out. So the first module here, we're just going to get familiar with a couple key commands for PowerPoint. So the 5 things that I want to focus on in the next section are listed here. So the first, we're going to spend some time on guidelines. Second is on the slide master, color palette, quick access toolbar, and the undo limitation. There's a number of, call it setup options for PowerPoint, as well as just basic commands like save as. I'm not going to spend any time on that. If anyone's worked in any Microsoft program ever, they know a lot of these commands already, copying and pasting, things like that. A lot of other PowerPoints waste time on that, and I'd rather just get to stuff that actually matters. Before we get into the next section, go ahead and open up a blank set of white slides, so basically something like this, and just have them ready for us to use. You can go ahead and delete the base information that's on there, so you just have that. And when I go through the commands with you guys, I'll pull these up and you can see what I'm doing. So let's get into the first item here, guidelines. Guidelines are basically make-believe rulers that are overlaid onto the top of your slide to help you identify and line things up. So they're there so you can see where your margins are, they're there so you can see where the center of the slide could be, and they help you line things up slide over slide. If you've ever put a ruler on a construction paper when you were in art class, your guidelines do basically the same thing. So to see them, you'll follow the commands that I have listed here. So for a PC user, hold down Alt and hit F9, and for a Mac user, go ahead and hit Control Alt Command G simultaneously. You can also, I think in both Mac and PC, just right click on the back of the slide, and there's this option here that says Grids and Guides, and then you can go ahead and click on this item here. It says Guides. And what you should see are a set of dotted lines that show up on your slide. So in your blank set of white slides, you should basically get this. So these are those make-believe lines. These are the guidelines. We're going to go ahead and set these up to help us line things up slide over slide. And when you set them up, there's a little bit of a science to it. So I'm just going to show you guys what I mean. Slides, you can basically quarter them after setting up a number of items on your slides. Usually when you have a slide, you have the title at the top, which is what's shown here. The slide can be quartered to make sure that things are all lined up. But then under that, sometimes people reserve space for a subtitle. At the firm that I work at now, we actually use the subtitle frequently. So they use big, simple 1 or 2 letter titles at the top, and then they write the full sentence that we talked about earlier in the training just underneath that title. Most firms actually will just put the whole title at the top, or especially most consulting firms will put the whole title at the top. But in some cases, you do have to have space reserved underneath the title for the subtitle. Then what you want to do is basically the rest of the slide we'll call the body of the slide. This is where your content's going to go. The first set of guidelines you want to set up will be for your margins on the left and the right side of the slide. Shown here, content is usually put underneath the title of the slide. So for us, that would be anything under this blue line. All the content needs to go under this blue line. And that leaves margins on the left and the right side of the page. This is important because you want to keep all of your content underneath the title in case you print something out and the printer's not working well and it might cut your slide off. If you bind information, the hole punch may remove some of the content from your slide, especially on the left side of the slide. And just as important, just aesthetically, it's good to have all of your slides contained in the same area over and over again on every slide. It looks pretty when you're flipping through your slides. So the first set of guidelines that you want to set up are shown through these orange dotted lines on the left and the right side of the slides, basically just to the left and just to the right of the title bar. The next set of guidelines you want to set up are on the top and the bottom. So these are margins on the top and the bottom of the slide. You want to give a little bit of room in between that space for the subtitle and the content that you put on the page. So that's the top orange dotted line. And then you also want to have a dotted line or another guideline at the bottom of the page for margins to make sure that none of your content bleeds onto the footer that's probably in the template or slide master for your slide. Then finally, you want to set up a set of guidelines to help you understand where the center of the slide is, in case you have a diagram where you need to have things centered. So you'll run one guideline through the center of the slide vertically, and that'll help you figure out the left and the right sides of the slide as well as the center. And then you also want to have another one running through the center of your slide vertically, and this will help you identify vertically, obviously, where the center of the slide is. Note, though, that this horizontal guideline, the one that's run horizontally through the middle of the slide, is not in the dead center of the paper. It would actually be up a little bit higher. And that's because if you take the inside of all of these orange lines, again, what we call the body of the slide, the center of that is actually not the center of the paper. It's a little bit below because you had all of this area that you would accommodate at the top. So we're going to go ahead and set that up when we set up these guidelines. And then what you're left with are 4 panels for the slide. And this is where you'll put all the information. Think of these as buckets or slots for charts, for diagrams, for bullets, and you'll use these to put your content on. It's funny to note, though, that most slides come out on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, but when you accommodate for the margins, the template footer at the bottom, the title and everything at the top, you're really only left with probably a 6 by, 10-inch or 9-inch square. And so it really does reduce the amount of content that you can put on the page, especially when you're accommodating for things like spacing or font size. So just a little tidbit for you to think about when you're putting content. So let's go ahead and set these up. I'm going to switch back over to the blank set of slides, and I'm on a PC, so I'm just going to hold down Alt and hit F9 to create new guidelines. I'll go back into the deck here for a second. For a PC, you're going to hold down Control and drag the guidelines left and right, and that's going to create a new one. And for Mac, you're going to hold down Alt. So let me go back to my slides here. Again, I'm on a PC, so I'm holding down the Control key. I'm going to click on that guideline. I'm going to drag it to the left and let go. And you can see it created a new guideline over here on the left. So again, I'm just going to hold down Control and pull one over here to the right. For Macs, you would do the same thing, but you're just going to hold down an Alt key, and then you could do the same thing here horizontally. Maybe we have a make-believe title bar up here. That would go something like this, and you'd have, you'd have your title at the top, mix dummy slide, and underneath it you would have had a subtitle. So maybe we reserve a little bit of room for that. And then we'd set up another set of slides, guidelines down here. Bring that down. Now you can see what I was talking about earlier. This horizontal guideline that's directly in the middle of the slide is not actually dividing up the body of the slide evenly. So if you take a look, and I'm just going to use a little fake ruler here for a second, drag this down. This is actually 5.3 inches. So for me to have the guideline, it has to actually go down here, right in the middle of that area. And now you have 4 equal boxes that are the panels. So you want to have these set up on every slide that you work on. It'll help you make sure that all the content's in the same space. You'll have good margins. We'll talk a little bit about how to use these again later when we're working on slide design.